Okay, so let's split this hive. As you can see, it's starting out a double deep hive, and hopefully it's got two deep full of bees and brood. So it's got a great bee population. We'll give them some smoke. We've got our apivar strips in already, which is great. I'm gonna pull those out. So I'm gonna start with the second frame. All right, so I wouldn't call this a frame of brood. I've got a little bit of cap brood here, but overall it's a frame of cap honey with open nectar, just a little bit of emerging brood. This side, I would say that's about a half a frame of brood. So I'm gonna call this a half frame of brood. I'm also going to be looking for the queen, but I like to set the brood aside. So I often have one stack of brood and then one stack of honey. So I'm going through here. Here's our queen right here. So there's our queen bee. So this is a frame, you probably can't see in the video, but this is a full frame of eggs and larvae. So this is all eggs and larvae in here with some cap brood. This is all eggs and larvae. So I'm gonna say that this is a full frame of brood. Now I'm gonna set this in a special spot because I know the queen's on it. So I'm kind of setting that aside. Now my job is easy from here on out because I found the queen. And so I don't have to look for her anymore. If I hadn't found her, I would keep looking for her as I went through this hive. So there's another good frame of brood. I'm gonna add it to our brood stack. That's the eggs and larvae on that side. That's all capped honey. So that's basically or uncapped honey. That's another half frame. Keep going through here, just a frame of capped honey. So I'm gonna set that aside. All right, so these frames that are left in here are capped honey as well. So at this stage, I'm really just identifying what this hive has before I'm really digging in and making the split. Set my lid aside. On the lid. Our apivar strips down here. Queen cup. Okay, so same process down here. I'm going to identify brood. All right, so we've got cap brood there, cap brood, eggs and larvae there. So going in our brood pile. Now once I find a frame of brood out here, I know that the rest of these middle frames are going to be brood too. So I often start going 2 frames at a time. It's unnecessary, but if you're making, 100 in a day, it speeds it up a little bit. So I've got 2 frames here, but I've got brood there, and I've got eggs and larvae and brood there. So there's 2 frames of brood. Another frame of brood. It's not an amazing frame of brood, but it's 2/3 brood on both sides, so I'll take it. And now this is pretty much just honey. So, okay, so now I'll go back and count. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 full frames of brood, and then 2 partials, so 6 frames of brood. I've got my frame of brood and my queen on it, so 7 frames of brood. My bee population is good. For these summer splits, like I've already said, I like doing 4 frames of brood, but I've really got 7 and a partial, so I'm good with that as far as quantity. So I'm gonna take my frame with my queen in it. I've got 4 frames in the bottom box with honey, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I like to move those, so I've got 2 frames of honey on each side. I've got my frame with my queen on it, so I just look real quick and make sure, yep, she's still there. So at this point, if this was an old queen, I could kill her and then requeen both of them, but I'm not going to today. We'll talk about reasons to do that, but I'm going to put her down here in the bottom box, and then I'm going to take, that was 1 frame of brood. That one makes 2 frames of brood. And I try to make sure they've got a mixture of capped and uncapped brood. So I don't want just all uncapped brood or all capped brood in each box. There's my 2nd frame of brood. I'm sorry, that's my 3rd frame of brood. And there's my 4th frame of brood. Now I've got my queen excluder. Put that right up on top. Top box. I'm going to do the same thing. So I've got, this was a frame of honey. Get on the outside. So I've got my 2 frames of honey. Got my 4 frames of brood. Put right there in the middle. Okay, there we go. So I've got 3.5 to 4 frames of brood in the bottom box, 3.5 to 4 frames in the top box. Now this hive, I'm going to close it up, and then I'll come back tonight and I'll pull off this top box and move it to a new location or rearrange the bee yard. Okay, so that went pretty smoothly. So that's how to do it if you do find the queen. Now, if you don't find the queen, or really, if you don't have time to find the queen, I mean, commercially, we don't go through every single hive and find every single queen because it's just way too time consuming. So let me go through this hive again and show you how we would do it if we don't want to bother finding the queen. Now you could just make the split without the queen excluder and then separate them and then go back in 3 days and see which has a queen, and we'll talk about that in the PowerPoint. But if we were going through this hive and didn't want to bother finding the queen, but we did want to make sure she was in the bottom box, here's what we would do. Let me take that queen excluder off. Alright, so pretend I just opened the lid again. What I would do if I knew I wasn't going to look for the queen is I would start going through each frame and I would just shake all the bees off. And I would start setting them aside. So there's my honey. There's a brood. There's a brood. Shaking all the bees off. There's another brood. Shake the bees off. There's our 4 frames of brood. And then again with the frames of honey, just to be safe, I'm going to shake all the bees off those. Shake the bees off. Okay. So now I know where the queen is, right? She's got to be in the bottom box. I just shook all the bees out of this hive. And then I would do the same. I wouldn't shake all the bees out of the bottom box, but I would identify the frames of brood. And if I needed to pull any brood out, I would shake those frames off down here as well. And then I would put on my queen excluder, put my box back on, and then set my split back up. So now I know that the queen is not in my split. I know she's in the bottom box. I just shook all the bees out. So I put these frames back in, give them till this evening for those bees to come back up into this box. And then tonight when I pull that split off, I know exactly where my mother queen is or is not. And you could still requeen at this point. I mean, you could, still find her. It'll be a whole lot easier to find her in that bottom box without as many bees and without looking through the boxes. So there you go. That's how you do a split.